I think yesterday had to be a kind of an odd day, Mike, for Brett Brown. There's some reports, circulating about his job, the Mike D'Antoni stuff. I'll just ask you, was there an odd feeling around that press conference yesterday with all this stuff going around that you're asking questions to a guy who's worried about his own job?
It's tough because Brett's really so good at handling situations like that he doesn't really let that cast a pall over the situation. Most of all, he just kind of came off as a guy that was, pretty excited that the season was over. As much as he likes working with these young guys and helping them improve and watching the team grow together and stuff. Any coach after what he just went through this season with the plethora of issues off court, the injuries on court, the lack of talent on the roster, the front office back behind the scenes situation, he just really came off as a guy that was, basically relieved that, the struggles of the past season were behind him.
So Colangelo yesterday is basically doing everything he can to try to show that Brett Brown's his guy. A CBS Sports report speculated that if Mike D'Antoni was going to get hired away, that rather than lose him, they promote him. So at this stage of the game, should Brett Brown be concerned about his job entering next year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in his situation you have to be, which is unfortunate, obviously, considering, the situation that he's endured over the past 3 years. I think, everyone in Philadelphia obviously wants to see him at least get an opportunity with some real talent to see what he could do. And, I think the support that Brett has in the city has, might have some to do with the fact that he's still the coach right now. Colangelo came out. He was on Breakfast on Broad yesterday. As you alluded to, he basically said that, Brett Brown was going to be their guy at least starting the season. And, I think at least some of that might be due to the backlash that, a new GM might get from coming in and immediately removing, a revered coach of his duties right away. But, if you're Brett Brown, I think ever since they brought Mike D'Antoni in, it was kind of, considering the connection between him and the Colangelos, obviously. I think Brett Brown would, be wise to be looking over his shoulder. And especially, if he does make it through the offseason and is the coach, starting next season, things don't start too great after the first month or two. You got to wonder, he wasn't Colangelo's guy to begin with. He was Hinkie's guy. So you got to wonder, how long of a leash is he really on?
All right, Mike, let's look at some of the things that Coach Brown did say in that postseason press conference yesterday, updating on some of the key figures here. Joel Embiid, he did not rule out the idea of him playing in the summer league, and we kind of discussed this a little bit the other day, but to hear Brown change course on that a little bit, that's got to be a good sign.
Yeah, all indications right now, everything surrounding Embiid seems pretty positive. And, of course, the concept of him not playing in Summer League was obviously based on Hinkie being in the front office dynamic. There's, I don't think anyone at this point is exactly the thinkings of the Colangelos at this point in regards to Embiid and the team as a whole. So, there is a possibility that they, want him to get out there if he's fully healthy, which, it seems he's really progressing toward the stage of, being the healthiest he's been, at least since he's been a Sixer. I still wouldn't necessarily expect him to play. I think they might want to, slowly get him in, do some scrimmaging with the team and stuff before, and then at least have him ready to go for the season. But especially considering, as you mentioned, Brett mentioning it, it's definitely a possibility.
Dario Saric is the other guy from that draft. Some reports that the Sixers are planning on buying him out later on in the spring or maybe the early summer. And the Brett Brown said he does believe, that he could play small forward and power forward, kind of a do-all type of player. So is it a foregone conclusion to you, Michael, that Saric will be a Sixer next season?
I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't say it's a foregone conclusion until, I actually see him over here in a Sixers jersey practicing with the team. He's still under contract technically until the buyout actually goes through. I wouldn't say it's a foregone conclusion, but all signs point to it. Saric himself has expressed his desire to come over to the Sixers, this summer multiple times. And, everything seems on course. Brown was, very spoke very highly of Saric at the press conference. Said, as you mentioned, that he's very versatile and he could see him be, a forward who plays a couple different positions. So, I think the expectation, at least within the organization, is for him to come over and join the team this summer.
Jahlil Okafor about a month away from on-court activity, but I thought the key to that conversation yesterday was he admitted that this is going to be very difficult. And it seemed that he has said this a couple of times. Do you get the indication that Brown, if he had a choice, would break those guys up?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be difficult, especially he made reference to, the task of juggling all these guys next season on the front court with Embiid, obviously Nerlens, Okafor, and Saric if he comes over. I think Brett said something along the lines of, that was a good problem to have, which, it's true to an extent, but it's definitely it's going to be difficult. But then, of course, there's also the potential that, one of those or more than one gets moved this summer. So, at this point, it seems Brett doesn't even know necessarily exactly who he's going to be working with, heading into next season.
Philly was the first.
Yeah, and one thing is for sure, when you talk about Okafor and Noel, those two guys had trouble. Now you add Saric and Embiid into the mix potentially. I mean, that would be a huge hope. That really clouds things up. And I thought yesterday Brown, for the first time, kind of admitted we need to start drafting for need, not necessarily the best guy that's out there. So I wonder if he's not the guy making the picks, but if that is also the feeling of the front office as well, because obviously if you have number one, Simmons, I don't know what position people think he plays, but it seems like a crowded house if you bring Simmons on board.
Yeah, when you're talking about fit, a lot of people then point to Brandon Ingram as being a better fit for the Sixers as currently constructed. He's a guy you could just put in on the wing and can shoot and spread the floor. Whereas Simmons, is his exact position, although he's super talented, what exact position he'll play in the league yet isn't known. A power forward, a small forward, and he can't shoot well, at this point either. Which, so as you said, it kind of adds, a little more question to the front court and that whole issue that Brown will have to deal with. I think the draft this year will definitely factor, especially with Brian in charge. It'll be what he, kind of said, an acceleration of. The process and looking to start winning. And I think that, that factors in the fact that at the draft you have to start, thinking about what you already have and then, plugging in players based off that. And, so if that comes down to the Sixers getting the top pick, it'll be interesting, to see where they go between Ingram and Simmons.
Michael Kaskey Blomain, the real Mike KB on Twitter. Mike, you wrote a piece at 973ESPN.com about Brian Colangelo. And it starts off by saying he's not necessarily going to veer from the process. How do you anticipate Colangelo? What's his blueprint for this? I mean, let me ask you this. DeMar DeRozan seems like he makes a lot of sense, right? The connection there. He's a free agent. Apparently, he's got some shoe deal, things that escalate if he goes to some bigger cities. Philadelphia, I think, is one of them. Does Colangelo get involved with a player of that level?
Yeah, honestly, I think he at least tries to. Whether or not he's successful is yet to be seen. Even last summer, obviously nothing materialized of it. But Hinkie tried to have meetings with, Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler, the top tier class of free agents, and that's what his stockpiling of the cap space has all been for, having the opportunity to spend and maybe even slightly overspend on a couple, high-level free agents. Whether or not DeMar DeRozan is necessarily, that top tier of a player that he's worth, using all of this, that's a separate question. But I think that Colangelo will definitely be at least entertaining and trying to lure some of those guys. DeMar DeRozan, there was reports, that have been around about Jimmy Butler potentially being on the trading block in Chicago this summer. That's another guy, a great 26-year-old, two-way player that would, fit with the Sixers very well right now, considering what they have. So, with all the space and everything that Hinkie left Angelo, at this point, I think he is going to use it to at least try to attract some bigger names like DeRozan.
Who, in your opinion, Michael, is the most tradable guy on the Sixers? If the Sixers were to trade one guy, who is that guy that would be at the top of the list?
I mean, it has to be Okafor, and that's not necessarily a slight against him. It just has more to do, I think, with his value. Embiid has the potential to be the best player currently on the roster, but his market value around the league right now is basically nil just because, no one knows exactly what to expect from him. So you're not going to get nearly the return value for Embiid that you would, if he ends up being healthy and turning into the player that people think he could become. And then, Nerlens, as great as he is, there's, league-wide concerns about his abilities on the offensive end.
If you had to pick, if you had to pick one over the other, which guy are you picking, Noel or Okafor?
I'm picking Noel to stay on the Sixers.
We agree with that. I guess because to me, Noel does something elite. I mean, he has an elite skill. That's not a knock on Okafor either. His game, and even if he is elite at something, his elite skill isn't a elite relative skill in today's game.
Yeah, Noel just fits better with the current flow of today's game, where he can be a center, just get up and down, finish at the rim, initiate fast breaks with blocks. Okafor, his game's more, old school a little bit at this point.
All right, the NBA draft will be, or actually the lottery will be the next thing that we'll be keeping an eye on for the 76ers, and then the draft coming up late June. And we will have our Sixers draft party. We will have a pretty big Sixers announcement to make here in about a month. So pay attention for that. Michael Kaskey Blomain at The Real Mike KB. Check out that article at 973ESPN.com. Thanks, Mike. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Mike. You too, man.